Imagine waking up one morning and being told that the most powerful security official of a nation of 90 million people, a man who spent decades negotiating nuclear deals, who sat in the inner circle of supreme power, who was considered the last surviving brain of an entire regime, was killed overnight while you were sleeping. Not in a battlefield, not in a military base, in Tehran, the capital city, the heart of the Islamic Republic. That is exactly what happened last night. And if you think this is just another headline from another day of this war, I need you to stay right here, because what happened in the last 24 hours has changed the trajectory of this entire conflict in ways that most people are not fully processing yet. Welcome to Unlocked History Hub. Today, we are going deeper than the breaking news. We are going to talk about what the killing of Ali Larijani actually means, not just for Iran, not just for Israel, but for every single person watching this video, including you sitting right here in the United States. Because this war is not staying in the Middle East. It is already at your gas station. It is already in your grocery bill. It is already reshaping the world your children are going to grow up in. And I want to make sure you understand exactly how and why. Before we go any further, if you are new to this channel, hit that subscribe button right now and tap the like button. We cover stories like this every single week. Stories that go beyond the surface, that actually explain what is happening and why it matters to your life. You do not want to miss what is coming. Now, let us get into it. Ali Larijani was not just a bureaucrat with a fancy title. To understand why his death is so significant, you need to understand who this man actually was. Larijani came from one of the most powerful political families in Iran. He served as the Speaker of the Iranian parliament for nearly a decade. He was Iran's chief nuclear negotiator at a time when the entire world was watching those talks. He sat on the Supreme National Security Council, the most powerful decision-making body in the entire Iranian government. And when Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed on the very first day of this war on February 28th, it was Larijani who was widely believed to be one of the few men still capable of holding the fractured Iranian leadership together. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz confirmed the killing this morning. He also confirmed that Gholam-Reza Soleimani, the commander of Iran's Basij paramilitary force, the internal security militia responsible for suppressing protests and maintaining regime control across the country, was also eliminated in the same overnight operation. 2 men, 1 night, both of them among the last senior figures still standing in Iran's leadership structure after nearly 3 weeks of relentless strikes. Now here is the question that every serious analyst is asking this morning. Is Iran's command structure actually collapsing, or is this something else entirely? Because there are 2 very different ways to read what is happening right now. The first reading is the one coming out of Washington and Tel Aviv. The message is simple. The strategy is working. The regime is being dismantled layer by layer. Khamenei is gone. IRGC generals are gone. Nuclear scientists are gone. And now Larijani, the last credible strategic mind at the top, is gone too. From this perspective, Iran is running out of people to lead a coherent response, and the end of the regime is only a matter of time. But here is the second reading, and in my view, this one deserves much more attention than it is getting. One expert quoted this morning described what Israel is doing as a game of whack-a-mole, and that phrase stuck with me, because history is full of examples where removing 1 leader, 2 leaders, even 10 leaders does not stop a movement, it hardens it. When you kill a government's entire visible chain of command, you do not create a vacuum that leads to surrender. You create a situation where dispersed cells, regional commanders, and lower-level operatives act without central direction, and decentralized retaliation is often far more unpredictable and dangerous than coordinated military action. Iran has now fired over 54 waves of attacks since this war began. The killing of Larijani happened last night. This morning, Iran fired new salvos of missiles and drones at Israel and at Gulf Arab neighbors. The attacks did not slow down. They continued. That pattern matters, and it tells us something important about the gap between the official narrative and the operational reality on the ground. Let me walk you through what is actually happening in this war right now, because the full picture is something that most mainstream coverage is not connecting for you. Since February 28th, the United States and Israel launched what they described as a targeted campaign to degrade Iran's military and nuclear capabilities. Over 7,600 strikes have been conducted inside Iran. Khamenei was killed on day 1. Multiple IRGC generals, nuclear scientists, and intelligence officials followed in the days after. The Dimona facility in Israel's Negev desert, the country's undeclared nuclear research center, was struck by Iranian drones in what analysts described as one of the most significant breaches of Israeli air defense in modern history. Iran's Sajil ballistic missile made its combat debut, specifically engineered with a maneuverable warhead designed to defeat layered interception systems. And now, with Larijani and Soleimani confirmed dead, Israel's defense minister is telling reporters that the high rate of turnover in Iran's leadership is continuing and even accelerating. Those were his exact words. High rate of turnover. He used a corporate phrase to describe the systematic killing of an entire government's leadership. Think about that for a moment. Meanwhile, the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the man killed on day one of this war, has made zero public appearances since being appointed by the Assembly of Experts on March 7th. Zero. The man who is supposedly now the supreme religious and political authority of 90 million people is invisible. Whether that is for security reasons or because the command structure is genuinely in disarray, nobody outside Tehran knows for certain. And that uncertainty is itself dangerous. Now I want to talk about something that is not getting nearly enough attention in this discussion, and that is what this war is doing to the rest of the world. Because the killing of Larijani is a major story, but the story that affects your daily life, and I mean the life of every American watching this right now, is the economic shockwave that this conflict has already sent across the globe. Let us start with oil, because this is where it gets personal for every American household. Before this war began, a barrel of Brent crude oil was trading at around $73. In the first days of the conflict, it jumped over 10% immediately. By the time Iran moved to functionally close the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply travels, prices surged past $100 a barrel and briefly touched $120. As of this week, Brent crude is sitting above $103. California's gasoline prices have already crossed $5 a gallon. The national average has risen by over 40 cents per gallon in a single week. And here is the part that economists are saying clearly. Even if this war ended tomorrow, prices would not come back down immediately, because it is not just supply disruption. It is the damage to infrastructure, the shipping insurance crisis, and the collapse of confidence in Gulf transit routes that takes weeks and months to repair. The International Energy Agency tried to respond by releasing 400 million barrels from emergency reserves worldwide. The United States alone committed 172 million barrels from its strategic petroleum reserve. It did not work. Prices stayed above $100 because 400 million barrels, as enormous as that sounds, covers less than 4 days of global consumption. You cannot release your way out of a waterway that is functionally closed. Major oil companies including Qatar Energy, Kuwait Petroleum, and Bahrain's Bapco have declared force majeure and halted production. Saudi Aramco and the UAE's ADNOC shut down refineries. When the world's largest oil producers cannot get their product out of the region, the entire global supply equation changes. And the people who feel it first are not the executives in boardrooms. They are American families filling up their tanks, buying groceries, paying utility bills, all of which are tied in some way to the price of energy. Now let us zoom out further, because oil is just the beginning of the economic damage this war is causing. The Strait of Hormuz also carries roughly 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas trade. Qatar is the world's largest LNG producer. After Iranian drones struck Qatari gas facilities on March 2nd, Qatar Energy halted all gas production. Within days, European natural gas prices nearly doubled. This matters to Americans because energy markets are interconnected. When Europe scrambles for alternative LNG supplies, it competes with American buyers for the same cargoes, and prices rise globally. Japan has 60 days of strategic petroleum reserves left at current consumption rates. South Korea, the country that makes the semiconductors that go into your phone, your car, your laptop, has 55 days. When those countries start cutting industrial production to manage energy costs, the supply chain effects ripple into American markets 60 to 90 days later. Your next electronics purchase, your next car repair, could cost more directly because of what is happening right now in the Persian Gulf. The World Economic Forum called this a structural shock to the global economy delivered at a moment of geoeconomic fragility. Chatham House, one of the most respected think tanks in the world, projected that if this conflict continues for several more months, oil could reach $130 per barrel. Eurozone inflation could peak above 4%, and the United States itself would experience a meaningful slowdown in economic growth. Beyond the economics, the human cost of this war is staggering and it deserves to be named clearly. Iran's Red Crescent has reported over 1,300 people killed inside Iran since the strikes began. In Lebanon, where Israel has launched ground operations targeting Hezbollah positions, over 850 people have been killed, and more than 1 million Lebanese, roughly 20% of the entire country's population, have been displaced from their homes. A man was killed in Abu Dhabi from missile debris. Dubai briefly shut its airspace as Iranian strikes reached the UAE. Over 4,000 flights per day were cancelled at the height of the airspace closures. Emirates, Etihad, British Airways, Lufthansa, Air India, all of them suspended or severely reduced Middle East operations. Airlines worldwide raised ticket prices, blaming a spike in fuel costs and rerouting around closed airspaces. The Trump administration's top counterterrorism official, Joe Kent, a retired Green Beret and longtime Trump supporter who served as director of the National Counterterrorism Center, resigned this morning. In a public letter, he wrote that he could not, in good conscience, support this war, stating that Iran posed no imminent threat to the United States and that the conflict began due to pressure from Israel. He became the highest-profile administration official to step down publicly over this conflict. His resignation is significant not just politically, but because it tells you something about the internal debate happening inside Washington right now. People with classified intelligence, people who have seen the actual assessments, are choosing resignation over participation. That is not a small thing. Now, here is my perspective on where all of this is heading, and I want to be direct with you. The strategy of systematically eliminating Iran's leadership assumes that if you remove enough people from the top, the system collapses and a political resolution becomes possible. The problem with that theory is that it has not worked so far. Khamenei is gone, dozens of generals and scientists are gone, Larijani is now gone, and Iran is still firing missiles. It is still closing the strait. It is still hitting Gulf Arab neighbors. It is still launching drones at American bases in Iraq. An Iran-aligned militia fired drones and rockets at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad just this morning, and 6 of the 7 projectiles were intercepted. The regime that was supposed to collapse under this pressure has instead dispersed its command, activated backup systems, and continued fighting in the only asymmetric way that causes disproportionate damage to the other side, by keeping the strait closed, by keeping energy prices elevated, by keeping the global economic pressure building. In my view, the critical question that nobody in Washington or Tel Aviv is answering publicly right now is this: what does the end state actually look like? What is the definition of victory here? And is there a diplomatic path that gets both sides to a point where the strait reopens, missiles stop flying, and the global economy stops bleeding? Because right now, both governments are projecting total resolve and the certainty of victory. Both cannot be right at the same time. What I think we are watching is a war that started with a clear military objective: degrade Iran's nuclear capability and eliminate its leadership. But that has now entered a phase where the costs to the rest of the world are escalating faster than the original objective is being achieved. The strait is still closed, the missiles are still flying, and the economic damage is compounding every single day. For the American viewer watching this at home, the honest truth is this: this war is not a distant event. It is already in your gas prices. It is already in your grocery costs. It is already reshaping the supply chains that determine what things cost and how available they are. And depending on how the next few weeks unfold, whether a diplomatic framework emerges, whether the strait reopens, whether the interceptor shortages on Israel's side become a decisive factor, the situation could stabilize or it could escalate into something that economists are already describing as a potential crisis worse than 2008. I am going to keep covering this as it develops because the details matter and because the connections between what happens in a 21-mile waterway in the Persian Gulf and what happens in your daily life are real and they are direct. If this video helped you understand something that the headlines alone were not giving you, please share it right now with someone who needs to see the full picture. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to know what you think. Do you believe this war ends through military pressure, or does it end at a negotiating table? And if it ends at a table, who is sitting in those chairs, and what does the deal look like? Tell me what you think. I read every single comment. Stay with Unlocked History Hub because this story is moving fast, and you need to be here when the next chapter breaks.